Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. And welcome to today's webinar, How to Protect K12 District Data from Ransomware and Phishing, hosted by ManagedMethods. My name is Jake Kosowski, and I will be your host for today's webinar and discussion. But before we get started, as folks are coming in here and getting settled in, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items to quickly cover. So for today, all attendees are muted. For today's discussion. There is a Q&A session at the end of this presentation. So if you do have questions, feel free to drop those into the chat panel or the Q&A panel, I believe. And also, if you'd like, go ahead and share with us, where you're tuning in from today, maybe what the weather's like. I always like to hear where people are joining and where they're watching from, and it's cool to see everyone connected, and joining today. This webinar will be recorded as well, and will be available shortly afterward, typically within 24 hours after conclusion of this event. And we'll be sending that via email. So please keep an eye out for that in your inbox. So get going here. So for today, I'll do a quick intro of who ManagedMethods is, what we do, and I'll kind of lay the groundworks for today's discussion, how to protect against ransomware and phishing by laying out the ransomware and phishing problem schools continue to face today. And then I will have a discussion with our panelists here, Greg Hogan, on how to protect against ransomware and phishing. And then we'll move into a brief ManagedMethods demo where my colleague here at ManagedMethods obviously will give a demo of the platform. And then that's when we'll move into a audience Q&A for the last 15 minutes or so. Would like to answer any questions you all have. I'm sure Greg can pop in and answer those questions as well too. So let's get into it. Like I said, I'm Jake Kosowski. I'm the communications manager here at ManagedMethods. And then I have my friend here, Greg Hogan, the network and data security coordinator at Bibb County School District, who I will officially introduce here momentarily. But a little bit about ManagedMethods. We are based in Boulder, Colorado. For those who may not be familiar, we are based in Boulder, Colorado, have been here since 2014, so just northwest of Denver. We have over 30 employees focused specifically on education with 4 regional sales team members serving districts across the country and internationally also. We do have a dedicated customer success and support team helping districts every step of the way, from implementation to being customers 6 year, couple of years, and they're top notch. And I'm sure Greg could attest to that as well too. So we also have ManagedMethods employees here who are parents with children in schools, as well as spouses and family members who are educators themselves. So we see the ins and outs of how school districts operate, especially from an IT perspective and instructional technology perspective. We live it every day. We are heavily partnered with Google and Microsoft, as you can see on these slides. And then we are affiliated and a sponsor of COSIN, the Consortium for School Networking, and take data privacy very seriously for ourselves, but also for our school district customers and helping protect the sensitive data you all collect and store, as you can see. Student Privacy Pledge, our Student Data Privacy Consortium membership, and so on. So why are we still talking about ransomware and phishing today in schools? And frankly, it's still a problem schools are continuing to face. So from the K12 Cybersecurity Resource Center, over 1,100 publicly disclosed cyber incidents in the US have been reported since January of 2016. 408 of those incidents, or there were 408 incidents in 2020 last year, which was an 18% increase from 2019. And 50 of those last year were ransomware incidents. So the numbers continue to go up. And then 36% of those 408 last year incidents resulted in the exposure of student or staff data. And really what we're seeing this year, and it's been reported from a few other organizations like the Cybersecurity Resource Center, is that ransomware incidents, they're increasing in severity. So ransomware attackers, they are now exfiltrating data from districts that they're using before or during an attack to increase extortion demands. And also ransomware is causing schools and class cancellations because schools can't get into their technology to facilitate classroom learning. So in 2020, there was 15 school districts reported to have been closed or have classes canceled due to ransomware. And then also, K-12 resources, they're strained, whether it's, budgetary reasons, lack of cybersecurity expertise, limited access to tools. But there's also there's cultural norms in education, especially around sharing of knowledge and accessibility for everyone within the district. Maybe some gaps in data privacy understanding and what you can and can't do among teachers and other staff. And with that, staff are often not as tech savvy or security focused. So a lot of awareness training and reminders and hand-holding may be needed in districts in moving forward. So, and frankly, tech change is hard in districts. And I know districts today are still evolving and learning, especially from the past events of the past year. And, we're moving forward and we're plugging along. But with that, I would like to officially bring in our panelist, Greg Hogan, for a discussion on how to protect data from ransomware, phishing, and other risks. So Greg, thank you for joining us. And I don't know if you want to give a quick intro to Bibb for our audience.
Yeah.
But
Thanks for having me on. My name is Greg Hogan. I work for Bibb County School District here in Macon, Georgia, which is right in the middle of Georgia. I have been with Bibb County now this is my 4th year, and I've been in K12 IT for almost 20 years now. So I've had my hands in K12 technology, system admins, school level tech for a long time. So I've worked at all different levels, but I've been in my current position as a security coordinator for this district for the last 4 years.
Awesome. And then I'm gonna stop my share real quick. Just confirming. Okay, looks like everyone can still see me. So Greg, how about we start off, what would you say, especially around ransomware, what is the top thing K-12 IT leaders and administrators, need to understand about protecting themselves from ransomware? I know we keep continuing to talk about it, but it's still out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think K-12 leaders in IT need to understand that they are vulnerable and they are a target. And K-12 specifically, as of late, is a bigger target. The K-12 community is what I consider a soft target, because they're just the funding and the security level is just not in place across our nation in a way that keeps us completely protected. So I think leaders just need to understand that this is a conversation that needs to be had, and tools need to be investigated and put in place to help protect them. And education for their end users needs to be put in place. Yeah,
and then especially over the course of the past year, I know I mentioned that ransomware incidents are becoming more severe. There was 50 in 2020. How is cloud computing, or I guess that larger shift to the cloud by school districts, across the country, how is that impacting districts' vulnerability to ransomware and other types of attacks?
Yeah, absolutely. When everybody switched, when COVID kicked in and everybody switched to a virtual environment or a hybrid environment, it required schools to rethink how the data that they were sharing while everybody was on the network contained inside now had to be kind of spread out over a cloud solution. And so the data is now both in the cloud and on your infrastructure and syncing back and forth. And you need to have tools in place that monitor that type of data in the cloud, so when it comes back on network, it's protected or it's cleaned or it's already quarantined. We got students and staff now leaving the district, the safety of your infrastructure network, going home, working from home, doing virtual learning, and being exposed to a less secure environment. And then when they come back, they're bringing that data back in, or it's syncing to the cloud and coming back in that way. And it's very important to have tools in place like ManagedMethods to capture that data, quarantine it, alert the proper people, and just add that layer of security. It's very important.
So you mentioned a few tools, ManagedMethods included. But what steps are you and your team taking to protect that data?
Sure. So we have several things in place. We're a Microsoft shop, so we utilize a lot of the Microsoft tools that Microsoft offers. We use Windows Defender. We use ATP, which is Advanced Threat Protection. So again, that mitigates a cloud type antivirus solution where if a device is off the network and it's infected, we get alerted and we can manage that device away from the network. We're utilizing 100% OneDrive syncing with our district. So all students and staff, the devices that they are assigned are completely automated for OneDrive syncing. And that in turn adds a layer of security for ransomware protection and backups, and just having that if something was to get infected or encrypted, it's backed up with OneDrive, and we can easily restore to a snapshot that Microsoft offers. So those are some additional tools that we have on the back end for security side of things. An additional component that we have in place would be multi-factor authentication. We require all our staff to have multi-factor in place for all of their accounts, and that helps with the phishing side of things. And then conditional access would be the other thing. Just making sure that we don't have logins that are happening from outside the United States. So we're taking advantage of a lot of security tools, putting a lot of things in place, and I feel like we have a pretty good standing where we're at currently.
Absolutely. And then with there being more with remote and hybrid learning happening, I know there's going to be a lot more in-person learning, or there should be, I guess, come this fall. I know you'd mentioned to me that you guys have already started your school year,
Yes.
which I didn't
Yes.
realize that.
Started this week.
Yeah, but what are the main differences, I guess, protecting data in the cloud versus on premises that maybe our listeners should be thinking about?
I think it's just really important that you have a footprint in both and visibility into both. Again, it's easy to protect your infrastructure when everything is in-house, but that's just not the environment that we live in anymore. And content is now in both places, in the cloud and in-house. And you need to think about the tools that you can put in place and the automation and the alerts in place to manage both off and on network.
Yeah, so say for off network, in the cloud, as students and staff are accessing their school applications or creating files and everything remotely, wherever really, what are some things that IT staff should be looking at, maybe within the applications, like what
Sure.
kind of behavior, if you will?
Yeah, so definitely phishing emails, anything that falls out of the ordinary with that. One of the things that is great about the tools that you guys have is application control. A lot of users sign up for different services online, and they'll use their district account to sign into applications. We monitor that in a sense of we want to make sure that the accounts that are being used for our district are being used safely. And some services that are out there that allow you to sign up with single sign-on or partnerships with Microsoft, they're not safe. And we're able to go in and see the types of applications that are tied to our district accounts and revoke access to those applications if we need to, if we deem that application isn't safe. These are things that we want to watch for and monitor. And we didn't have that level of insight before. The other side of things is we want to make sure that specific accounts are not being attacked from foreign countries excessively. And we have safeguards in place that if an account is being brute force attacked, the account goes into a lockdown state. And these are all policies that we have in place for our district accounts, especially high-level accounts, executive accounts, superintendent accounts. They're all high target accounts, in my opinion. And they just need an extra layer of protection and eyesight on them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I know when you and I, chatted previously around some of the differences, you mentioned how everything now, and I'm sure you're seeing it too, everything's moving to the cloud. So, there's other things you need to be looking for, I guess, in terms of, you mentioned oversharing of data or, who has access to things inside of your Microsoft environment. And so hopefully you could speak to that a little bit more for our listeners.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Users just it's an educational thing with just getting users to understand that you can overshare your content. Your OneDrive is now your hard drive. Your profile is now synced to your OneDrive, and you have the ability to share the contents of your hard drive with another person. But sometimes people can overshare, and they can make that share available to everyone and not do it intentionally. But you need to have tools in place to alert you when that happens. We've had it here in our district where a staff member may share a folder and they only intended to share it with one person, but they've generated a public link and they've shared it with everybody unintentionally. And with a solution like you guys, we're able to get alerted to that. And then we can reach out to that staff member and say, hey, listen, you overshared this file. Let's go through the process of sharing it properly, or putting an expiration on the share. Things like that. There's just, it's a learning process, and it's an educational process. You're really only strong as your weakest link in your district. You can put all the fancy tools in place, but there's also just a level of teaching the end user how to properly take care of the data that they have, because they are a target. Everybody who has an account in our district is essentially a target.
Right. And I know we also talked before, it applies to ransomware, it applies to phishing, and then other risks too. But we talked a little bit about, the shared responsibility model of security, especially I think it applies a lot to the cloud, because, your district, you're a Microsoft customer. But from what I've heard from others, it applies to Google as well too, but there may be some misunderstandings there that, I have Google, my stuff's in Google's environment, that they're protecting it for me, but that's, not always the case.
No, it's not.
But if you could, talk a bit about, maybe what that shared responsibility model, kind of entails, and, I guess where the responsibility lies for, say, your district or just districts in general in that.
I think that the responsibility relies with everyone. Everyone needs to help each other out and just be aware. But it really, from the top down, from the superintendent down to the bus driver, all of those counts they're important. Everybody's account is important. And from my perspective and from my role, my job is to teach and to share the knowledge that I have with teachers. I mean, we do like a tech tip of the week, and we send an email out and we say, this is how you properly share a OneDrive file, or this is how you identify a phishing email when it comes in. And we give it real life examples of phishing emails that come into our district, and we highlight all of the warning points that they should watch for. And that has really helped our strengthen our chain, if you want to call it, in our district, that our users are now becoming more aware of this. Whereas before it was, let's just click whatever we want, open whatever we want, and it had no regard for the implications of that. So over the last 4 years, we've really come a long way, and users are just a lot more sensitive to the types of malicious intent that is coming into our district.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with that model too, I always like to give the analogy, I guess, of maybe you guys are renting the cloud environment or like the house from, say, Google, or I guess Microsoft in your case, but it's not Microsoft's responsibility to put like ADT on it. You got to be locking up your own doors and protecting everything on the inside of it. So that's the analogy I like to use there as well. But I agree with everything you said too. So in particular with ransomware and cyber attacks, kind of what are some of those early warning signs you would be looking for at your district, or just what should our audience be looking at in terms of like early detection, I guess, that may raise some red flags? And
I think it's really important to have a good alert system in place. Set thresholds for emails that come in. If 50 plus emails come in to all your users at one time, and it reaches your threshold of being suspicious, then you need to have a procedure in place to reach out and also lock down. We have that. We have thresholds in place where if a user account sends out more than a certain amount of emails, then we get alerted to it. If a forwarder is put in place on an account that shouldn't be put on there, we get alerted to it. So it's really important to take advantage of the tools that you put in place and put the right alerts in place. And and that they go to the right people or multiple people. You don't want it all going to just one person. So these are the kind of things that we put in place for our district. And we want to make sure that that just people understand patterns, and because there is patterns, and a lot of these like phishing or even ransomware, they follow a certain pattern, and the patterns evolve over time. But it's good to just kind of be aware of those patterns and educate your users of those patterns to make them easily identifiable.
Right. So say for people in the audience today who, maybe they're like, okay, after I get off this, I want to go check out my environment or check out my things. Like, what would they look at? Is it, you mentioned login activity before, the oversharing. Are those all potential early warning signs, I guess, that cause for the investigation?
Yeah, and whether you're a Google customer or a Microsoft customer, they do give you some level of insight into those types of activity and those logs. And then you take it a step further with a product like yours, and it simplifies the automation process. It simplifies the dashboard process of you're not hunting 5 or 6 different dashboards to take advantage of certain things. It puts it all in one. So I'd highly encourage users to take advantage of what they already have that they may not know that they have. So get all of that in place first. And then once you feel comfortable that you've taken advantage of the tools that you have, take it to the next step of adding that extra layer of security for your environment.
Great. So now, thank you, Greg, for sharing all that too. And I'm sure we'll come back to you as audience has, questions around ransomware and phishing, everything. But I'm going to share my screen again really quickly for folks. And then I'm going to confirm first that you guys can see my screen, correct?
Yeah.
Cool. So now I'm going to move into introduce my colleague, Stephen Rothfuss, our operations analyst here at ManagedMethods, who is going to give a brief demo for everyone in the audience around the ManagedMethods platform, and how we can help address ransomware, phishing, and other data risks living inside your Google or Microsoft environments. So Stephen, I'll let you take it away.
All right, thanks, Jake. Go ahead and switch over my share. All right, and again, for sanity's sake, Jake, you seeing everything all right?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so today I'll go over ManagedMethods monitoring features and security aspects to help reduce those chances of phishing or ransomware attacks in your environment. Following those initial areas we cover, I'll also explore other critical monitoring features such as the application access and that user login activity. For today's purpose, although our G Suite and Microsoft 365 sections have very similar layouts, I'll be using the Google Workspace for Education tiles for today's demo.
Oh, Stephen, sounds like folks can't hear you. I'm not sure if you have a mute going somewhere else.
No, I shouldn't have anything else going. It's just
Oh. All right, never mind. I'm sorry. So
Yeah,
one
no
person can't hear you.
Sure that at least everyone can hear. Take a second here.
The volume is just a little low, but I can hear.
Okay. So I'll try to speak up a little bit further. Again, just to make sure that everyone's in good shape. So to reiterate, although the G Suite and the Microsoft 365 sections have very similar layouts, I will use the Google Workspace for Education tile on today's demo purpose. So jumping into things and moving into our Gmail tile. Currently, we use 3 methods to find potential phishing risks. These include Google's Web Risk API, the Fish Tank Consortium, and also our own internal phishing scan. So our first method, utilizing Google's technology, allows us to scan every link for known phishing threats. And these links are being scanned within emails. And if they're found, they're then recorded and flagged with the phishing URL icon in the ManagedMethods console. So we can quickly indicate some of those by using our quick filter and use our emails with phishing. Now you see you get our summary here and everything's filtered into the ones that have that phishing flag. Clicking the icon will display a breakdown of the risk details. Really, these details indicate the URL in question, the scanning method, scan time details, and specific threat types. So on top of Google's safe browsing, ManagedMethods also partners with the Fish Tank Consortium. This scan performs by indicating other known phishing links, which also occur in the emails. But PhishTank has been a really great resource for us, as it provides a large collaborative site for reporting those phishing links. And I believe currently they've identified over 2.4 million known phishing URLs. So that's a great database for us to reference. In addition to scanning those links, ManagedMethods also scans the content for suspicious phishing behavior. So for this, we use our own technology to analyze content and primarily identify if the sender's address domain is different than the reply to domain. Additionally, we'll determine if the content matches other well-known phishing email phishing databases. So in the event that these risks are flagged in your environment, we do provide a variety of actions you can quickly leverage. These include things like downloading or previewing the content, or even going ahead and sharing the details with somebody outside the ManagedMethods platform via email. You can also take other single or bulk actions here on emails that are coming in. And again, these will include things like deleting something from that user's inbox flat out, or quarantining it, which in our case ends up moving it to the user's trash folder. And given, maybe it gets a review, things look okay, you do have the ability to restore emails back into the user's inbox. So that's a great kind of additional feature to take action, maybe do some internal investigation, see if it's deemed okay, and you do have the ability to restore if you have taken a quarantine action. Additionally, if you want to see other kind of just more general details about the email, a simple click of the subject will bring that up. And from here, you can see your recipients, again, the contents, mailboxes. If for any reason, you're seeing that these are going to external domains, you can simply view those users that are actually receiving these and indicate, is this somebody that was intended to be reached or potentially not? So although phishing attacks, are the lead contributor to compromised accounts and access into your environment, there are definitely some other key important indicators that ManagedMethods identifies to give you the visibility and to put into those potential security concerns or breaches. Typically, as Greg had mentioned here, these red flag indicators consist of unoriented login events, locations, strange email or drive file activity, and high-level application permissions that are granted into your environment by those users. So ManagedMethods does provide the visibility in monitoring into user login activities with some geolocation mapping. Plus, we'll give the visibility and actions onto applications which have been granted access into your environment. For example, as far as the user logins, on our summaries tab at the bottom, here's where you'd indicate that geolocation map. So we see a handful of our users are getting access in here from the United States, but we also have these gray and red pins here to the right outside of the country, which are indicating some unapproved or suspicious unapproved logins. You can click any of these pins to see who or what user was actually caught in that event. And if you want to dive a little bit further into it, clicking on that user jumps into their section, will be kind of a breakdown of what they're a part of, but more importantly, a further summary of the recent login events that were a part of their account. So from here, you can see our IP addresses are provided, which will give you a geolocation, kind of that mapping, which indicates, okay, we're seeing this person is signing into the United States, but we're also seeing some other concerning places like in India, Japan. So this account could potentially be compromised. Now, the big thing to indicate here is going to be your event type. So the login successes are certainly going to be the ones that raise the most red flags. Those are certainly indicating, hey, this user or this login event was successful. They were granted access into that user's account. Given that you've kind of gone through here, seen some interesting things and have deemed this account to be compromised, there's some quick actions you can take from a manual perspective. The first one would be an integration we have with Have I Been Pwned? Simply what they are is a database documenting publicly known about data breaches. So if your user was ever to be part of one of those, we'll return the details showing what source was compromised and the data leaked during that event. But in our events for our test, there's no pwnage for this specific account. The next actions you can take here, they're going to be best practice, are going ahead and suspending the user account, or maybe even resetting that user's password. So alternatively, if there is somebody in your environment that's suspended already, you can also unsuspend that account. All right, so beyond the email side of things and user logins, apps are additionally a good targeted gateway for malicious activity within your environment. So if any app is compromised, again, those bad actors can gain permissions granted by the application, which can lead to more internal attacks. So apps with high-level email permissions can definitely pose those security gaps. What we end up doing when an app is discovered in your environment is we go ahead and look at the scopes and rank those apps from kind of a low to critical level based on its access levels. The major scope to be cautious here, kind of in our topic today, would be the read, send, delete, and manage your email. So if these access levels, if the app is compromised, really easily allows the bad actors to execute phishing attacks as an end user. To quickly filter down to those specific apps and questions, we can go over here to our access levels and say, hey, let's look at the ones that just have that scope that are viewing and managing those emails. So for example, we then get this subset of results, and you can further go in and investigate, hey, what scopes has this user granted access to based on this app? And we can see here when we get down to the end, this Cloud HQ app does have the access to read, send, delete, and manage your emails. Now, in these events, if they come up, you can say, is this an app that's going to be concerning to us? Do we know that teachers or maybe students are now utilizing this app? Or we can go ahead and say, hey, this app isn't something that we deem necessary in our environment. And based on the scopes and kind of critical risk levels there, it's not something that we want to have around. So with that being said, you can simply come through and take some initial actions, whether it's going to be a bulk action or maybe a one-off. But here we can go ahead and revoke access to the users that are linked to the app. And that number is provided here on the right-hand side for the counts. Initially, you can warn the users that are part of that app. And then more of our internal language here in terminology is the sanction and unsanctioned. And what this is doing is kind of giving the green light to that app. And you guys kind of, as a district, you reviewed it, given it the thumbs up, and it now has kind of your seal of approval. So in that example, we can see here that GAM has the check mark, or the shield with the check mark, indicating that it has been sanctioned. So really, to reiterate, what that's saying is somebody has come in here, although this one does have very high level permissions, they've given it that sanction status and its seal of approval, so it'll be in good shape. The reason for doing that is so you can kind of take some more steps forward and look at specific conditions or whatever it may be based on a policy side of things. So for example, as Greg shared, if higher ups, users like principals or superintendents grant access to this app and it becomes compromised, that bad actor then can send out malicious emails on that account's behalf. And that definitely causes some concern there. Other times we've seen bad actors impersonate that compromised account to acquire other personal details from your end users. So to better avoid these cases from occurring across the board, what we like to do is take advantage of those individual bulk actions, or we can kind of, where the rubber meets the road here is adding in the automated policies that look for specific conditions in the apps content section or maybe users side of things. So let me show you kind of what I mean by that. So in our custom policy side, we out of the box will provide you a handful of things that are kind of been very attuned to the K12 markets. But in here, you can also create your own custom policies to look for specific conditions, as well as create remediations, so actions are taken on your behalf. So by default, the admin of the platform will receive an email alert given that one of these conditions is triggered. But you do have the ability to delegate email alerts kind of at a more granular level to the necessary individuals on your team. So for example, for today, if we wanted to create a quick phishing policy, it would be as simple as looking into your source. We want to flag for emails, and when the emails are coming through, if any time it meets the condition of a phishing flag, we should be alerted on that. So as easy as creating the policy there, it then is generated at the bottom, in which case we can deem, hey, do we just want to get alerted about this? Or is it something that we want to take a step forward and have the platform take those automated remediations? The remediations here would simply say, do we want to delete that email from the user's inbox, quarantine it so it moves it to that user's trash and out of their site, or warn the user that this event has happened? Generally speaking, we see the delete email remediation action take place. And again, what that's saving is that the user doesn't actually need to click onto something or click a link that they weren't supposed to and kind of get themselves in more of a predicament than they ever wanted to. Additionally, we do have some notifications here to let you know either as a user or the end admin that this remediation did take place and that you're kind of in the clear. So that way you don't have to necessarily jump into the platform once you get the alert to make sure that the action has taken place or that email is gone. We give you that kind of sanity's sake. Hey, the action was completed successfully. That email in question was deleted. So the way we break down the policies beyond the content is also for the users and apps. What that gives you the ability to do is look more into the login side of things outside of the content. And, just as a general example, we can go ahead and look for something that's an unapproved country login. And when this event occurs, whether you get alerted just as a general administrator, or you want to go ahead and take an action on that account. Those actions would include suspending the user, resetting the password, or warning the user. As I mentioned previously, maybe the IT team or whoever the admin is that set up the platform initially isn't necessarily the person that dives in and does the initial investigation or kind of just keeps tabs on the user side of things. So you can delegate the alerts out to the specific people that it would be kind of in a comma separated list here. And that way you don't get alerted of the initial activity that was taking place. The team that would do the investigation goes ahead and kind of gets that forefronted information. From the app side of things, again, we give that good granularity to create your own or create one or use one out of the box. But let's go ahead and say you're looking for a specific app category, whether it's games, shopping, something that doesn't really make sense to be in your environment, or one that has a specific scope category or scope in general. With that being said, given that your policy is set up or you want to utilize one out of the box, let's say, for example, our apps with risk, really what that's looking for is any app that falls into that high level critical risk rating, and it hasn't been sanctioned by your guys' team yet. So if that event occurs, you can go ahead and take the initial action to revoke the access that user just granted or warn the user. Revoking access is definitely good to kind of keep those high level ones out of your environment. However, this is just a one-time action so that when the event occurs, it'll always go back and revoke access. However, if you don't see kind of a behavioral change action and that user, if that user continues to go in and just grant authentication, using the remediation to notify the user is definitely a good one. In addition, we have a custom message that you add here, which gives you kind of the granularity to go ahead and maybe tailor it more towards your users or your district, saying, hey, this app or the reason you're having to regrant authentication to this app is because it's deemed not necessary in our environment and we're revoking access. So that's a good way, again, to reach out to the user and kind of let them know, hey, here's what's happening on the back end. These kind of things are in place, and they're not just kind of in the blind as to why they're getting kicked off or why certain emails are moving away from their inbox, things like that. So although there are many other details and use cases we could review here today, this is all I had planned for our demo time slot. Of course, if you have any other sections or further questions you wanted to kind of inquire about, definitely feel free to provide those in the chat panel below, and we'd be happy to address those accordingly. But appreciate you guys, and thank you for all your time.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen, for that in-depth demo there of some of our features addressing ransomware, malware, and other risks. And then, Greg, I know you. Let's see if I get my share screen here. Cool, got that. Cool. Now we'll move into some audience Q&A. But Greg, also, I know you mentioned the importance of using automatic remediation and things. And since Stephen just dived into our policy, section of our platform there, I was wondering if you can maybe talk to maybe some of the policies that Stephen just showed, maybe that apply most to, say, your use, or what would be the most important ones our listeners or our audience should be considering.
Yeah, absolutely. So some of the policies that we have in place is specifically for emails that have social security numbers or credit cards in them. We have the ability, of course, just to block all that type of communication, but that would just create a nightmare for us because HR relies heavily on that type of content being communicated back and forth, especially for new hires. But what we've put in place is if an email is sent in or out of the district that includes the social security number, the user, the sender, gets an alert saying, hey, listen, this email includes a social security number and you shouldn't do that. So then it becomes an educational piece where we communicate with that end user and explain to them the importance of sending emails without that information or encrypting the email so that they're a little bit safer to send. that type of sensitive data. We have policies in place for malicious files. We have policies in place for one of the big things, and this is not on the ransomware topic, but basically one of the things that we saw was we were seeing users were sharing like copyrighted movies was a thing. And you can scan your OneDrive environment for that type of content, and then it becomes an educational piece of, hey, listen, it's not okay to do that. And they were using the movies for educational purposes in the classroom in a sense, but it's still not the proper channel to do that type of media format. It needs to go through the proper licensing and the proper sharing methods. So we were able to just kind of lock down and clean out any content that could get us in trouble. The other side of things for policies, we have self-harm alerts in place. We have alerts in place for where if an email or a communication is sent between a student that might generate some concern that needs to be intervened by a counselor. We get alerted to that, and we have policies in place where it alerts me. I then contact the school, reach out to the school staff, counselors, principals, and explain what's been found, hand it off, and then they can take it from there. So there's a lot of insight that's been granted to us with this tool to automate many things that we just didn't think were possible. And it just makes us do our jobs better. The data's there. It just now gives you a channel to make it available to other departments that can help them do their job better. So technology now has a hand in many areas of our district in a way that we just didn't see possible before. And that's been huge for us.
Yeah, and then when it comes to kind of going back to ransomware and phishing a little bit, but say with phishing, lateral phishing. So, if an email is coming from, say, one school district account to a different school district account, and it's kind of spreading inside of the organization, laterally, if you will, kind of anything there in place in terms of policies or, signs that districts should be looking out for, IT leaders should be looking out for moving forward when it comes to ransomware.
Have an action plan. Have an action plan in place when a phishing email comes in. I think the biggest thing that usually would happen early on before we had all of the tools and security pieces in place, when an account was compromised, the initial reaction was just to reset the password, and that was all that was done. And that's not enough. You have to clean out all the emails. You have to clean out the damage that was done. You have to clean out the sent items. You have to alert your users. So have an action plan in place, and we have that here. When thankfully now we haven't had a compromised account in some time since we put a lot of things in place. But when an email comes in, a phishing email comes in, phishing emails get through all the time. We have an action plan. We can initiate an alert to the school system explaining what the email looks like, who it was from, and then we have an action plan for cleaning up the emails that got through and cleaning out the email boxes. So it's very important to have a workflow and an action plan for these situations. And I know many school districts deal with these types. We do, and we have an action plan that's very quick, very seamless, and we move on to the next problem as it arises.
Yeah, and that actually a question was brought up in our audience that kind of plays into what I was having you explain a little bit more on, Greg. And Stephen, I don't know if you want to chime in on this too, maybe pop back into the platform. But the question, is, for the email tab, if we could talk a little bit more about the best use case for live email search versus email message search. So when you're investigating a phishing email, which would be the better tool there?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to dive back into that and kind of go back in a little bit more depth. So let me go ahead and share my screen one more time, just for example purposes. All right. So yeah, as you had mentioned, we do have the breakdown of the email messages section versus the live email search. Really what this is breaking down in is the email messages. We'll go ahead and show you everything that's happening. And in a 4-hour window, we actually will remove all the messages that weren't flagged with a risk. So that way it just kind of keeps things clean, and the risks that are actually being flagged in the email don't get pushed down into, the later pages, and you lose sight of that. However, as far as investigating phishing, I would say that the initial quick filters and using the summary search is your first tool to jump in and say, hey, what are the new ones that are coming in? However, if these events occur, and like Greg had mentioned, you need to take some further actions or make sure that other things are cleaned up, that's when your live email search will kind of come more in handy. Of course, there's a ton of other use cases here for this, but generally speaking, you can look for the user that potentially received that phishing event, or you're noticing some compromised activity going on. What you can then do, given you have your proper credentials here, is provide as much conditions as possible for the search, and then look for the specific user in question, or maybe the recipients that are receiving the email, whatever it may be. So in these events, what you can end up going to, let me go ahead and look for see if our test user comes up. So we can go ahead and say, hey, let's look for this sender, administrator at Cam High School. See what's been going on with their email activity. And in the event, let's say that they were compromised, they started sending out emails to student 4, student 1, student 3. You can quickly come in here, view what kind of content was being sent to those users, as well as maybe take a bulk action and delete it in general. So there are some kind of quick actions you can take depending on what you initially see based on the email messages. And if you want to dive a little bit further into the activity of what's going on with those users, you can certainly do so. So again, as I've mentioned, it'll pull in all the emails that come from them. If you want to delete the specific one that came through that was in question, you can certainly do that on the one-off, or kind of do a full purge at a further date. The other thing we've seen, a little bit off topic, but it's a good use case on live email search, is sometimes accidentally the user or a teacher, superintendent, sends an email to somebody they didn't anticipate to send to, still within their environment. So instead of sending it to Al at their district, they accidentally send it to all. And what the admin can come in and do is remove that email from the end user's inbox, given that they're inside your domain, so that initial sender can go ahead and say, hey, it just was supposed to go to Al, and everybody else that received it no longer kind of has access to it. So that's another great use case, but definitely as far as the phishing goes, jumping in and seeing the initial concerns from the email messages, and then using the live file search to dive a little bit further into that user or other actions is definitely most appropriate there. So hopefully that cleared up a little bit of your question there and provided some additional insights.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Stephen. And then, since we're on the topic of live email search, I'm sure, maybe the question comes up for files. And since we have you on your screen here, maybe you could pop into that real quick and share that with our audience, and then we can get back to some questions.
Sure, it'd be great to go over that. And we'll also touch, Greg had mentioned, sometimes the sharing is either accidentally shared inappropriately, or maybe the user is just taking the easy route out, not sharing it to the users they're initially supposed to, and kind of just going with a global share or a link share. So from the drive file section, we do indicate, how the shares are being sent. And also additionally, if these shares are just people that are internal within your domain, or if it's actually reaching an external domain. So in this event, we can quickly identify, hey, this specific transcript form is being shared to this admin Bruce gentleman. Now, is that appropriate? That's kind of your call there. But given that you do want to kind of go through and maybe break some of the share permissions from your users, saying, hey, this shouldn't have been shared to outside your domain. Not sure really the use case for why this went to admin Bruce, but let's go ahead and unshare that kind of as a one-off condition. So those actions are available to you, as well as kind of the initial indicator as to what's going on. Of course, if these are flagged with any specific risks that you have activated in the ManagedMethods platform, they'll also show that, as well as what kind of content was flagged there in that event. So just as a brief overview of the actions you can take manually from the drive file side of things, you can quarantine the drive file. This behaves obviously a little bit different than your email source. So quarantining the file actually breaks all the shares within the file, will give access to the admin of the ManagedMethods platform, and move it into a unique folder of theirs called cam_quarantine. This generated when they set up the platform. So from here, generally speaking, the users can go in, the admin can take ownership of that file or whatever is in question, give it manual review, see kind of what's going on. Again, maybe they've indicated that it was just students being students, maybe sharing concerning language, or an end user sharing some inappropriate data that wasn't supposed to be provided in docs. So in those events, if you've reviewed it, things look good. You also, again, have the ability to go through and restore it to that user, and that'll re-grant the shares and the ownership back to the original creator there. Additionally, you can download the file in question, go ahead and delete it from your end user's drive, break those shares kind of on the one-off, even get the file activity, kind of what's going on with the audit, see people who are adding shares, maybe removing or adding content, whatever it may be in your use case. Last one here, like we had seen on Gmail, if somebody doesn't have access to the ManagedMethods platform, you can simply share that kind of data or row of data to the user outside that outside of ManagedMethods, so they can get eyes on it, maybe provide some additional insights. Now, with that being said, there are bulk actions you can do so that you can look at, maybe a way that something is being shared, or you've indicated that there's a specific shared type or a handful of files that you want to kind of break. So in this event, we can use our 2 examples here and use the bulk action to break. And we give you the granularity, say, hey, do you want to break it from any specific users that may be a part of it? Just go ahead and flat out all break them, or go in and do it at a more granular permission level. So if anything's public on the web, you can make sure that those are removed, or maybe there's other ones within your environment that's kind of been discussed, not ideal behavior, but we're still seeing users kind of take those actions. And I feel like that's a pretty good overview, at least initially, based on the topic and some of those discussion points that were brought up.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. And I will.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I'll take the screen share back from you. So we got a few more minutes for some audience Q&A. If you guys, if anyone has any questions here for Stephen or for Greg, or just about ManagedMethods in general, but I will move in here real quick just to talk a little bit about why schools partner with us as we get wrapped up here. We hear from our school partners, user experience, having a single platform for Google, Microsoft, and Zoom environments is very helpful. Stephen talked up to it a little bit, but the visibility and control in terms of the more granularity within Google Workspace and Microsoft 365 that ManagedMethods offers is very helpful. And then Greg, you alluded to it a little bit too with the our student safety signal monitoring capabilities there with our signals tool, our AI-powered machine learning artificial intelligence tool that helps detect self-harm, cyberbullying, everything you see here on the screen. And we're also able to delegate out those notifications, as Greg mentions too, to those within your district who would be most appropriate to receive those notifications. I guess with that, Greg, I'd like to, as we wrap up here, maybe have you, for our audience, any last words of advice, I guess, when it comes to ransomware, phishing, and other risks in their districts, especially as I know a lot of districts are getting ready for the school year to start. You've started as of Monday, but what are some last parting words of advice for our audience today?
Definitely just keep the conversations going. Keep your ear to the ground with just understanding that the threats are real, they're out there, they're happening. Keeping up with the K12 cybersecurity map, that's a great resource tool to just kind of stay in the loop as to the different breaches that are happening. But being aware of it, keeping the conversations within your organization, your district, your department happening, and talking and utilizing the tools that you have. There are lots of tools out there, and take advantage of them, and definitely investigate you guys' product more, and reach out to your team to get a demo of it. It's a great tool. The support's awesome. We've been a customer for years. We love it. I couldn't do my job without it. So I highly encourage other districts just to look at it, see if it's a good fit for your environment.
Great, thanks, Greg. And I completely agree with everything you said, especially on the advice part, keeping the conversations going, especially as this year starts to kick off for other districts across the country there. So with that, I'd like to thank our audience for tuning in today and, hearing from Greg around ransomware, phishing, and other risks that may be living in your environment. Stephen, thank you for giving a demo of ManagedMethods for our audience and, sharing the features that address ransomware, phishing, some other risks most. And then obviously, Greg, thanks for your time and for coming on as always. Pleasure having you join me and share your insights and expertise with our listeners. And then if you would like to, for the audience, if you would like to schedule a personal demo, there's the link listed here, but I've put it into the chat for you if that is easier for folks to click on. But yeah, if you're interested and you want to learn more, you can always reach out to myself, info@managedmethods.com. Greg, I'm sure would be happy to be a resource, and I could connect you with Greg to share more of his experience with us. I know as he said, he's been with us for 4 or 5 years. So yeah, give it a try. And again, want to thank everyone for tuning in today, and then thank you, Greg and Stephen, for your time and for sharing more about Managed Methods and talking on how districts can help protect their data from ransomware, phishing, and other risks. So Greg and Stephen, thank you very much. And thank you to our audience. Thank you to our audience, and hope you guys have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. So thank you all.